And when the war begins, both sides are unprepared. There are small things that they just didn't expect. For instance, there's no universal train set, so the trains are not all on one kind of track. So trains can't go on different tracks, and so transporting people from one part of the country to the other is not possible in that, for a lot of trains. Sometimes it's certainly not easy. There's no national bank, right? There's no tax system to raise funds quickly. They don't have accurate maps of southern areas, don't know how to raise or distribute supplies, right? So that both sides are completely unprepared for enacting a large-scale war. And the South especially has a brand new government that doesn't even really know how to organize that stuff and who's in charge and how you elect new people. So the North initially has a policy towards the war called the Anaconda Strategy. And the idea in the Anaconda Strategy is to put together a naval blockade of the South to strangle the South economically, so there's no trade in or out. But the North has limited naval resources at the start of the war and a long coastline, so they have to defend it as well as build new ships to be able to enact this strategy. So the Anaconda Strategy doesn't end up being effective until quite late in the war when they finally built enough ships. Now the Southern strategy is to outmaneuver the North, right? To try to stay on the defensive, inflict casualties, and then regroup, right? They have superior generals, and the North tends to attack and then retreat quickly. So it's letting the South enable their better tacticians, and the Northern generals don't really take advantage of their numbers and weapons the way they could. Now the early battles, most, right, half to a third of the fighting took place between the two capitals, between DC and Richmond, is a distance of about 120 miles. The first major battle is the Battle of Bull Run. And the Battle of Bull Run, which is in Virginia, was in July 1861, right, 3 months after Fort Sumter, after both sides have had some time to sort of regroup and figure out what they're doing. 800 men died at Bull Run, and the Union retreated from this battlefield. Now, that first battle was quite shocking. More men died on that day than any other battle in American history up to that point. And it was very clear right from the get-go that this war would not be over very quickly. And there's some stories of the first Battle of Bull Run where, because it was so close to some major cities, people were like, oh, you know, especially some people on the Union side, some civilians, took their picnic lunches and went and took their families to go watch this battle that would decide that the North was going to win and that this was over. And it was such a horrific thing that it sort of shocked the nation. It's clear this war is going to be brutal, it's going to be very deadly, and it's not going to be over quickly. So McClellan is the general of the Union forces and the Army of the Potomac, right? So Union forces have several different armies, but McClellan is a very hesitant general, and he doesn't fight again until June of 1862. Now, McClellan took about 100,000 Union troops into Virginia, where he was rebuffed by General Lee. That's the battle here. And in August of 1862, Lee was victorious again in the second Battle of Bull Run. And so Lee starts a campaign against the North. So these first two battles, the first Battle of Bull Run, the second Battle of Bull Run, they're widely spaced. So anyone who's been serving these armies, they're not seeing a whole lot of fighting, but those that do are very deadly, which makes both sides a little hesitant about going forward. Now, the next major battle is the Battle of Antietam. The Battle of Antietam is in Maryland. It's in September of 1862. In one day of fighting, 4,000 men were killed. Another 18,000 were wounded, 2,000 of whom died of the wounds. So a total of 6,000 men died from fighting on this one day, September 17th, 1862. So more men died in that one day of fighting than any other single day in American history up to today. And more men died during that one day than all other wars in the 19th century combined, and that's excluding, obviously, the Civil War. Right? The dead lay 3 deep in a field. It was sort of like they mowed down like grass before a scythe, which was a quote from an observer of the day. Now, the North in the Battle of Antietam repelled the South, and Lee was forced to retreat. And so we have a sort of back and forth in the first 2 years. Now, in December of 1862, the Union attacks Lee's armies again near Fredericksburg, Virginia, in December of 1862, which is this is not a fight. This is just a massacre. But the Union doesn't press their advantage, and Lee escapes. So, fighting in the West was also happening. The Union troops are under the leadership of, and sorry, this is another picture of trenches and the dead at Antietam. Now, Union troops are under the leadership of Grant in the West, right? And he becomes a future president. He's a future president, and the strategy in the West was to go down the Mississippi River and capture New Orleans, right? And that was the idea, was to, part of the Anaconda strategy, divide the South from the West, is divide it from Texas, keep Texas and their supplies away from the rest of the South, sort of divide and conquer, but also sort of strangle the rest of the Deep South and control the trade, right? If you have the Mississippi River, then you control a lot of the trade, and you can bring troops down the Mississippi River faster and help invade the South. So that was one major policy under Ulysses Grant. The other was to invade Tennessee, sort of northern part of the South, and control the railroad depots there. So the idea from the Western theater was to stop anyone from moving west and try to create a jumping off point to then invade Atlanta later on, right? To sort of split the Confederacy, surround them by land, so it's split from Texas, it's split from the northern part of the South, and Grant ends up capturing 2 forts in Tennessee, and then he takes New Orleans, right? And Grant withstands an attack at Shiloh in April 1862, which had large casualties, right? So this early war suggests that the war is going to last a long time and is going to be pretty devastating.